My work as environmental chaplain since 2018 has reshaped perspectives for grassroots ministry that I developed since the early 90s. And that's why, in order to do justice to what I want to say today, I needed my words to be immersed in the sort of landscape we're talking about. Since lockdown, I've increasingly sought out spiritually significant sites to film reflections for our churches, encouraging care for and partnership with creation. And just as every small initiative makes a difference, so too considerations of scale are always significant. The careful, respectful use of peat as fuel by crofters, but on a manageable, sustainable scale, that goes back centuries. And it's rather different from bulldozing a bog to flood a city garden centre with all those plastic bags of stuff for gardens which would be better served by their own compost heap. Or indeed the carbon time bombs created by planting the wrong trees in the wrong place. And if that's on peatland, it can make things far, far worse. This is Blowhorn Moss. I've previously visited the World Heritage Site of the Flow Country in the northeast of Scotland, the red moss of Balerno, Flanders moss near Stirling. These are landscapes to get to know, to experience immersively, not just to mention. And that's what I want to get across. Not just argument for the head, but feeling for the heart. The statistics of carbon capture, biodiversity and the rest may not be compelling enough to convey what I think it's reasonable to call the holiness of such places, of whatever size, which is reason enough to stand up for them, protect them, manage them, restore them. As pilot projects in the last couple of decades have shown, this is possible within reason, even given the amazingly slow accumulation of the sphagnum moss. I will be attending a conference in Assisi this year, travelling of course by train, which will look at the implications of the Nicene Creed, that widely shared statement of faith which was adopted 1700 years ago. That creed identifies God as the maker of all things, seen and unseen. And that's a remarkably powerful principle, that beauty and holiness go beyond what for now we can assess. And this complements rather than contradicts all the science that is now changing that sad and temporary assessment of peatland as good only for burning. It's in my lifetime that there was a proposal to eradicate the blanket bogs of the island of Yell on Shetland on an industrial scale as fuel for a power station which would surely have had an absolutely monstrous carbon footprint. Mentioning Assisi and Francis, it's part of the rule of St. Francis, recycled by Pope Francis's essential document Laudato Si', that a monastery should be obliged to set aside a patch for wild flowers and herbs so that those who saw them could raise their minds to God, the creator of such beauty. St. Francis's response to the world around him was so much more than intellectual appreciation or even economic calculus, because to him, every creature was a sister, united to him by bonds of affection. So I also want to issue a call to caution when, maybe understandably, and also in response to the crisis of nature and climate, which will define increasingly the rest of our lives, when we begin to justify the claim that Christianity is a faith of care for creation, but we do so by resort to arguments of utility, of usefulness. Now, of course, we can make a case, and now we can even make an economic one, for the monetary value of carbon capture and storage, which these landscapes perform at scale with a consistency and a record which puts the expensive technology to shame. And as global CO2 levels reach 430 parts per million, that should give pause for thought. But it's a counsel of despair amongst people of faith if we speak, act and even think only in ways which seem no different from those around us. Indeed, it's the reliance on the grace of God and the courage to recognise the quite different value of compassion that we bring. And speaking within the season of Lent, we are reminded of Christ's reliance on the Spirit in that place described as wilderness, a habitat which for those 40 days he shared with wildlife, as also with angels, whether seen or unseen. And one of those things is to gain confidence that we approach life with a diversity of values. In Scotland particularly, I'm often seeing that things which are perceived as merely beautiful, even by the churches, are easily categorised as expendable. And when we see centuries-old assets of churches, landscapes and habitats sold on out of our care into uses which will destroy the character they've acquired over those centuries. I hope that my contribution towards this online gathering will emphasise this, that though official bodies are belatedly learning to cherish peatland, and more or less the same people who once paid folk to drain and destroy these landscapes are now paying them to flood and rewild them. And although peatland can finally be seen to have great value in terms of habitat and carbon capture over and above the ways in which small rural communities have used it respectfully, sustainably as a fuel, it is completely appropriate for bodies who work as or on behalf of faith groups to be touched in their hearts by a different sort of value, not just utility. Have the courage of our faith to do beauty, to do justice, and not to need to tell them apart. Finally, a spontaneous prayer which I recorded on the blanket bogs at Rannochmoor, part of a resource for Advent. God, our sustainer, surrounding us with far more than we will grasp, as part of the web of life, give us discernment to value that which may not seem of value to us. Show us your way of abundance, of change, of how to help what is already damaged. In the wilderness, surrounded by life, in the middle of everywhere. Show us there is no such thing as wasted land. And let the prophetic voice of heaven and earth, of sky and soil, the voice of the trees and of the mountains and of the insects we flee, let that voice sink in and be heard and discerningly, prayerfully acted upon in every part of our daily lives. Living God, let us not mention discipleship or mission as if those things did not take place by the grace of the environment in which we live, the earth of which we are part. Show us, show us, show us. God, our sustainer, we thank you for this season of creation. Amen.